Hello and welcome. My name is Edel Murphy. I'm the PPI Ignite NUI Galway Programme Manager. The aim of this presentation is to help researchers to plan for and begin to develop a PPI strategy. The presentation is primarily targeted at academic organisations, for example a department or a discipline or a school within a university, or a research group spanning a number of different disciplines or a number of different institutes. In October 2018, the Medical Research Charities Group in Ireland produced an excellent guide called Developing a PPI Strategy, a guide, primarily targeted at charities and patient organisations. Therefore, this presentation approaches the same topic from the perspective of a research organisation. Development of a PPI strategy should be done working with your PPI partners, but some organisations may not yet have established PPI partners. So as we go along, we offer you some suggestions as to how you might begin to develop your strategy in this situation also. Here are some questions you need to consider at the start. Why are you developing a PPI strategy? Who should be involved? What should your strategy cover? And how will you put your strategy into practice? What training and support will you need to deliver your strategy? How will you monitor and evaluate the impact of the PPI strategy? And when and how will you review and update your strategy? Let's think first about why you are developing a PPI strategy. Whose idea was it to develop a strategy? Where did the idea for this originate? Has it come from management in your organisation? Is it generally accepted across the organisation this is a good thing to do? Or is some work required to convince key influencers and others in your organisation that this is a good, perhaps an essential step for your organisation? What are the motivations behind wanting to develop a strategy? Is it that it is becoming essential to include PPI approaches in your grant applications to get research funding? Is it that there has been some PPI in your organisation already and you now want to expand it right across all researchers? Or have you PPI leaders that really believe in the value of PPI and want this to become a core value? Maybe the people driving this are people who have recently joined your organisation, or maybe there's people who have been working with PPI approaches for a number of years. It's important to think about the origins of and motivation behind developing a strategy. The origin of the idea will determine the steps you need to take to get buy-in across the organisation. By developing a PPI strategy, what are you aiming to achieve? Developing a PPI strategy should help you to be clear about why you want to involve public and patients in your research, what you hope to achieve by doing this, who to ask to get involved in your PPI activities, and maybe how to get these people involved, how best build and enhance PPI across your organisation, and where and when to involve public and patient contributors, and how to measure the impact of. Who should be involved in developing your strategy? You need to begin your PPI journey as you intend to continue. PPI is about working with public and patients in your research. We need to apply the principle of nothing about us without us to development of the PPI strategy as well as to PPI in general. Consider who to involve in the strategy. Consider involving active researchers, perhaps include a representative from the admin staff or technical staff who may ultimately play a key role in supporting PPI activities. It's particularly important to involve research staff both with and without current interest in or expertise in PPI. It's important that everyone who is going to be critical to the implementation and the success of your strategy is involved in developing it. It's very important that you include your PPI contributors and partners to develop your strategy. Who are they? Maybe you don't have any yet. That's an additional challenge. It is difficult to develop a strategy in an organisation where you haven't done any PPI previously or you haven't established PPI partners, but you have to start somewhere. Perhaps you can draw on the expertise of PPI contributors to other research organisations to get you started. For example, by consulting with an existing PPI group or with individual contributors at the start of the process, or you may be able to tap into a charity or patient organisation with some PPI experience and ask them for some advice when you start. If you already have PPI partners, that's great. Then you need to think about how will you facilitate their input? How much input do you want? Do you want to consult them once at the start of the process, or will it be an ongoing involvement? Will they review the strategy as it's developing? Will you focus on making sure the strategy will be written in a way that is understandable to a non-research audience? Will this be a priority? It's wise to draw on expertise or advice from outside your organisation, from people who have done similar work. Talk to people who have created their own PPI strategies. Look at strategy documents developed by other research organisations. Consider the strengths and weaknesses of those documents. Look at what has been done before and see how can it help you in your current work. What should your strategy cover? Strategy needs to give you a very brief background, identifying organisational boundaries. To whom does this strategy apply? It's important to define the terminology and terms that you're using. As we know, a lot of different terminology is used in PPI. It's used to mean the same and sometimes different things. So you need to define what you mean by PPI, what term or terms you use for public and patients, and then use these terms consistently in your strategy. Language is very important, but it can be a challenge to get it right. I think start from a position of respect for your PPI contributors and work with them to define the terms that are most acceptable to them. And this can vary in different contexts. So, for example, the term PPI members, service users, research partners, PPI contributors may each be appropriate in different contexts. Using the term patient for people working with researchers in an involved way is perhaps best avoided, as it can imply the person is defined entirely by their diagnosis and are little more than their diagnosis. And this is not a good place to start in terms of having a partnership in an involved way. Outline how you developed your PPI strategy. Who was involved, what level of involvement different people had, how consensus was reached on the strategy. This is a very important part of the process, and therefore it's important to document it. It can be updated as your involvement changes or varies over time. Your PPI strategy needs to define a vision, a PPI vision for your organisation. You need to set it in the context of the wider research vision that your organisation has. Outline the principles and core values underpinning your PPI, including avoiding tokenism, creating a culture of inclusion, openness and respect, and valuing the unique knowledge and expertise that researchers, PPI contributors, clinicians, healthcare professionals and others bring to the table. By writing these down in your PPI strategy, you bring a focus to these values, and this will influence the PPI that will be conducted in your organisation. By writing down your principles and core values, you can use these as a point of reference to reflect on different issues that arise during involvement activities as you go forward. Should your strategy include who your PPI partners are or will be, and where or how you will find these partners? Well, that depends. If you're defining a strategy for a research group working on a specific condition, then perhaps yes, in your strategy you can identify the key partners and how you will build and sustain relationships with them. But consider if you're developing a strategy for maybe a full department, let's say a school of nursing. Presumably there's a wide breadth in the research areas covered, and therefore the who and how of PPI partners will be very varied. But you need to give it consideration during the development of your PPI strategy, but whether you actually include it in the document or not is another matter. By thinking about it at this stage, however, you may decide that you will have one central partner, or perhaps that you will establish a PPI group that supports PPI generally in your organisation, but in some studies you will develop relationships with new partners and build new relationships. You need to set very clear objectives for your PPI strategy. These will be used to drive your operational plan. To a certain extent, you could say that when developing a strategy, your work is complete once you have defined the objectives. However, we would recommend that an effective strategy should also include an operational plan with timelines on meeting the targets. And you also need to include some details on how you will measure whether or not you are meeting each objective. You need to be clear on how you will monitor and evaluate progress on your strategy. This is a whole area of its own, and again, one that may evolve over time. A PPI strategy should identify a process for reviewing and updating the strategy. A strategy should be a living document. So identify when, how, and who will be involved in updating the strategy. If you have few or no PPI partners at the start, you can develop the strategy, and as you begin to build involvement partnerships, you can then ask these new partners to help you revise the strategy. Here are some final thoughts and advice. Consider the strategy as an operational document rather than a research document. Keep it short, clear, and to the point. It takes time to develop a PPI strategy. Don't rush it. Investing time will reap rewards as you build PPI in your organisation. Get buy-in by involving those that will be impacted by the strategy in the development of the strategy. Don't reinvent the wheel. There are some really good examples of PPI strategy documents available in the public domain online. Consider identifying one or more current or about to start research studies as PPI case studies within your organisation, and invest time and resources in PPI aspects of those studies to road test the strategy. Then you can revise the strategy based on how those case studies progress and what you learn from them. And critically, develop an operational plan to implement your strategy and to measure your progress. I will leave you now with pointers to some resources that you may find useful. In preparing this presentation, we drew on the above resources, as well as experience gained through developing our own PPI Ignite NUI Galway programme. We've developed this presentation to help others who want to do the same, as a number of people have asked us for some guidance in this area. We really welcome feedback on the resource. Please drop us an email at ppi@nuigalway.ie. Thanks a million.